Hello and welcome to the Be Formless, Flow Driven CEO. Right now, we're in the past and in the future, but we're present here today. I have the amazing and wonderful Chuck Garcia, all the way from New York City, one of my favorite cities in the world. And it's 5:08 on Monday, the 16th of June. And it's 7:08 a.m. here on Tuesday, the 17th of June. Welcome, Chuck.
Oh, thank you, B. And I really appreciate the fact that we are 14 hours apart and yet we are seeing each other in a crystal clear, completely unfettered way. How cool is that?
That is so cool. And I forgot to say, your backdrop is incredible. It's so on brand. I should have
I'm a
my,
mountaineer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing. Just looking at
Thank
it,
you.
especially in the morning for me, I'm like, oh, I like seeing that sunlight behind the
Well,
mountain.
in Australia, you guys wake up to the beach, Kosciuszko Mountain, which I do want to give a little bit of credit to as being the tallest mountain in Australia. You're a beach culture. In the
Yeah,
United
we are.
States, we got it all. We got mountains, we got beach, we got
Yeah,
cities. You get to decide
yeah.
what view you want.
I know you're pretty lucky though. I love the snow. I'm a boarder slash skier, and I do love getting to the States for that action. But yeah, I live right
Appreciate
near the
that.
beach, so I'm in Elwood, so
Yeah.
so literally 5-minute walk to the beach. So I'm very well the bay. I'm very lucky.
In the Bay.
But
Yeah.
we've got a lot to chat through, a lot to unpack. An executive coach, best-selling author, mountaineer, and leadership professor at Columbia Uni. You're the founder of Climb Leadership International, where you guide and support high-level executives and emerging leaders to navigate that complexity, pressure, and transition. And I certainly know myself a lot about that. And I know you do too, because you have a career that spans decades of experience, including as managing director at Bloomberg, at BlackRock, and at Citadel. I think you mentioned Citadel. So there you go. I haven't had my coffee, but I'm doing all right.
That's pretty
Uh,
good. You're doing great.
you're the author at you're the author of Climb to the Top, and I want to read this, a book that fuses communication strategy and leadership transformation. And drawing on all your lessons from Wall Street and mountaineering, you teach that peak performance isn't about just intellect. It's about emotional agility, inner discipline, and the ability to self-correct under pressure. And again, I love all of that. So you're not, but you're also a leadership professor at Columbia, and an executive coach to Fortune 500 leaders.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about it because you've been on quite the journey and obviously this mountaineering as well. And I know you said to me just quickly before we hit record that you're also doing a TED Talk in a couple of months in Luxembourg
Correct.
and around how well, I guess all your career experience and then the mountaineering and essentially falling off a mountain and that transition. And yeah, I guess for me, I had a similar but probably different experience in terms of what I like to say, falling off or jumping off a cliff into the deep unknown. So tell us about your journey. I want to hear it all.
Yeah, well, let me put into context first. You mentioned one of my books, my first book. There is a second book, though, that is the emotional companion to the first. And for our listeners, my first book is called A Climb to the Top. It is
Mm,
not a book about mountaineering. It is a book that uses mountaineering as a metaphor for how to climb careers. But instead of an ice axe and crampons, it's the communication skills that I developed over my many years on Wall Street. As part of my journey, I was very fortunate that 30 years ago, I joined this small little company that no one ever heard of called Bloomberg. I was Mike Bloomberg's 190th employee. That firm now earns $12 billion a year, and I was very fortunate to have spent 14 years there. Half of my time there, I was the company's public spokesman. I stood on stages all over the world, including Sydney and Melbourne. I stood on stages and convention centers in both of those places, and my job was to represent the interest of Bloomberg, but to do it from a stage. This was an incredible gift that I was given, not because I had communication skills that at the time people felt were so exemplary. I was just a little bit better than other people who were likely candidates for the job, and I turned it into something so incredible, and I am grateful for that. So it was through a series of events that often happens in life that makes us think differently about what's ahead of us. And I want to provide, and I think the best way to state my journey. On September 11th, 2001, which was a day that will live in infamy, I was scheduled to speak on the 107th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 9:20 in the morning. Now, for those who may want a history lesson on what happened at the World Trade Center that day, at approximately 9 a.m., a couple minutes before and a couple minutes after, two planes smashed into both the North and the South Tower. And by 10:30 that morning, those two structures had collapsed and almost 3,000 people died. Originally, 2 months before this conference, I was scheduled to speak at 9:20 a.m. as a keynote to open up a conference in this conference center on the 107th floor. 2 months before we locked down the schedule, a friend of mine who worked at a New York investment bank was scheduled to speak at 3:20 in the afternoon. Before we published the agenda, he had me and our conference producer from a London-based organization change the speaking times. He then switched to 9:20 a.m. I switched to 3:20 p.m. It is because of that phone call, B, that I am alive. Because sadly, my friend Scott perished when the buildings collapsed.
Mm.
That would have been me if I had not been so agreeable to change my time and accommodate his conflict. But I state all of that because something happened that day and made me ask myself a question that I didn't have an answer to. Now, I had stated to all my Bloomberg colleagues that I was going to be at the World Trade Center until 6 o'clock, and I said that in a calendar that is visible to the entire company. I had told my wife the night before, and I have 4 children, that I will be home at 7:30 for dinner because I am coming from the World Trade Center. I normally didn't tell her my location because we have cell phones and we're in touch. For 4 hours, B, the world thought I was dead, including my wife and my company.
Mm.
And when the cell phones went dead, when the towers hit, I had to walk back. I wasn't in the building, I was on the way. And when I got back to the Bloomberg headquarters, I was met by someone who knew me and said, Chuck, everyone thinks you're dead. Need you to walk around the building and go tell everybody, including our CEO, that you are alive because you are on a list that says unaccounted for and presumed dead. So before I head on, B, are you with me so far?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here, just listening very intently, because I'm just going, I mean, I remember watching it on TV at night,
Yeah,
that night, seeing the planes like live and went running out
right.
to my mum going, what's going on?
Right.
And
It,
like,
it, it, it was a war zone. And when the
yeah.
planes hit, anyone who, when the phones came back several hours later, we all called up and checked up on our friends. But I am relating that story, B, because if I talk about what is my journey, I'm very blessed. I've had a wonderful Wall Street career. But I ask myself, why was that not my day to die? Why did 3,000 people
Mm.
die and not me? I was supposed to be in that building. And most of my world, my family, my friends, my colleagues all thought I was, but I wasn't. And I asked myself, and I didn't have a good answer. Why am I here now? And it really prompted me to take a very good, hard look at my life and to examine and try to answer the question, why did I not die that day? So, as you can tell from the backdrop, I wasn't exactly sure how to answer that question. I didn't have a set of tools. I never studied philosophy, so I'm not a big thinker. I said, oh my God, how am I going to make sense of this event and what do I do with it?
Mm.
So, exactly a year later, I stood on the summit of one of the United States' tallest mountain called Mount Rainier. And Mount Rainier is a very tall mountain. It's 14,400 feet above sea level. And I went out into the mountains to try to find myself or to try to lose myself. I didn't know. I needed to get away from all of this
Yeah.
madness. And maybe I'll be able to answer that question. Anyway, a year later, I stood on the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. A year later, I climbed the Matterhorn in Switzerland. Then I climbed mountains in Ecuador and in the Andes, and now I'm climbing all over the world. But what I'm really doing, B, it was cathartic. I was trying to figure out why am I even here? And it became pretty clear to me through the years, and especially in one of my mountain climbs where I fell off the mountain at approximately 5,600 meters above sea level in Mount Elbrus in the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. I fell off the mountain. I went careening down the mountain by myself. I invoked a process called self-arrest, where I smashed myself into the mountain, my crampons and my ice axe, and it took 3 minutes to rescue me. And it was at that moment, B, when the guy who came to rescue me, my guide, took a carabiner and he clicked it into my harness. It immediately came to me, oh my God, all my life I've been living on a mountain of self, looking out for myself, which is fine, looking out for my family. But I made a pledge then and there when he came to rescue me and he clipped a carabiner and I knew I wasn't going to die that day because I still had to answer, why did I not die on Mount Elbrus?
Yeah.
I got to the top of Mount Elbrus then. I went home a couple days later and I made up my mind. I'm going to climb the mountain of others. I am no longer going to be obsessed with myself, but I am going to dedicate myself every day to go to work in the service of other people's success. And if the first mountain is about the mountain of self, the second mountain is the mountain of others. And for the last 10 years now, I spend every minute of every day guiding people up their proverbial mountains. Sometimes it's financial institutions, sometimes it's big industrial companies. I also teach students at Columbia University. It's my way of giving back, a wonderful institution. So my journey, B, was driven by an unexpected event that
Mm.
caused a massive chain reaction. First in my mindset, then in what I decided I was going to do for the rest of my life. And here I am. Everything that you described in that bio was a sum of the mountaineering journey that led me to think differently about why I was born.
Wow. Wow, what an incredible story. And that is huge. Like to yeah, to like it's oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with this because if that was what you're describing and everything that's happened, it's like, of course, anyone would have that same, why am I still here and why did it happen? Why did that moment in time change my trajectory? Did you
Indeed.
did you, Chuck, when you were like kept asking those questions, why, and I guess what I call soul searching, it's almost for me, it's what's that soul searching? Did
Yes.
you continue in that year of when you were going mountaineering and exploring all the different mountains? Were you still working at that point or had you taken some
Indeed.
time
No,
out?
I was still working in my Wall Street career. I went very big. In fact, what I typically did every other year, I took 2 weeks. I usually get 4 to 5 weeks of vacation. Every time I went on a mountain expedition, I normally needed up to 18 days. That was vacation time. So you take Saturday and Sunday and holidays and you add it all up. So I never climbed the Himalayas because it requires 4 weeks. I climbed a lot of mountains around the world that allowed me a window of around 2 weeks for each. So I was in the depth of my Wall Street career. I was at home raising children. I had family support. So every other year, I took my 2 weeks and away I went. Cell phones unreachable. I made it to mountains and I made it home. So I continued to live this parallel life. I was still in my first mountain of self. I was climbing my career, doing exceedingly well, very blessed to do that. I didn't know as I was doing that what the outcome would be. It's not something I could have predicted because it didn't come to me until years later where I finally figured out, hey, I can teach people to do what I did. I never envisioned that.
No.
But you get to a point in your career if you have the capital, often you don't have time and you don't have mobility. So I didn't need the capital anymore. I didn't want to lose money, but I didn't need to make money the way I did. What I didn't have, B, was time, mobility, and freedom. The freedom to make up my mind that today I'm going to go to work for someone else. I spent my time working for billionaires. And what do they want? More money. Of course. Why wouldn't they? They pay us to help them make more money. Well, what if I could do my own thing? I don't care about being a billionaire. I couldn't care less what kind of car I drive. But I had a completely different idea now in this second career for fulfillment and love and care and compassion. Those were never present in that other mountain. No one gave a damn. But now it's my life. I'm going to make the rules and I'm going to go to work every day in the service of others. And it has been, I didn't predict mountaineering. I didn't predict my two books. I didn't predict the TED stage. And I've got other things going on. So, B, I think to you, the life you have led and our introduction to each other, me, there are parallels among people who have climbed the self mountain, got to the top of that mountain, and realized in the soul searching, perhaps there's something more to this. We just need to give ourselves the space to explore it.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. That space piece for me, like I was saying to you before the show, I'm still just like, I think that's my big nemesis, if you like, or, getting fully off the self mountain is
Right.
being in that still. I've certainly slowed down, but still as a high performer, and you would get this as someone who, works with people, from high functioning, high performing, that there's just this at times you just keep pushing, 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 or you're wanting, 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 or like when you're seeking answers and you're like, where are they? Why aren't these answers coming to me as quickly as I'd like them to come? It's quite an adjustment, because you're also you're having to surrender and trust the process and allow things to
Indeed.
come when the time is right. And funnily enough, earlier this morning, before our pod, I was reading something exactly about that integrating, you're not being lazy, you're not doing things, you're still integrating. It was just a really interesting piece that I was just reading. I was like, aha. So I get these signs or I get these nudges, and I'm not sure about you when you were on your journey where it was like, because you've gone from Wall Street, right? You've gone from being working, like you say, with these billionaires, and then you've gone into, right, I'm going to serve others. I'm going to do something that fulfills me. I'm going to do it my way to give me that flexibility, that freedom, and no doubt to spend more time with your family.
Right.
Did people at the time think you were crazy? Like, was there people from your old world or the South Mountain that were like, "What are you doing?" Um,
For the people that weren't my friends, yes. For the people that were my friend, that are my friends, they said, "What took you so long?"
really? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, because the people who are not my friends, the superficial, the ones that chasing money, that want to wear a Rolex watch, I couldn't care less about that stuff.
No,
But that's a lot of the archetype of Wall Street that you see on television. That's not my tribe. My tribe are Wall Streeters, mostly because I grew up in that world, but they're kind and they're compassionate. They make a lot of money, but they don't sit around telling everybody that. They just make the world a better place very quietly and never make it into the headlines. So I think people saw me evolve through the years, almost fascinated by the fact that I'm on this mountain thing. And why would you do it? And some of the people in Wall Street, do you make any money climbing mountains? No, but that's how they think. That's all that matters is what's in their bank account. And when you have enough money in your bank account, how much more do you need? But
exactly.
to those types, they're in another place. Whatever, I respect it. They're never going to be in my world. But the people who love me and care about me, it was a no-brainer. They said, "Well, we're surprised you didn't do this earlier because we've seen in my Wall Street world, I was a mountain guide, so to speak. I was a very generous boss. I had very good mentors. I was not the command and control. You work for me, you do what I say. That wasn't my style. My job was to help other people to do what they did better. So, in a way, I always did it, and that was partly selfish. The people that worked for me through the years in my leadership roles, the better they did, the better I did. So,
Yeah.
I wanted them to be better. Yelling and screaming at them and telling them I'm the boss is no way to do it. But helping them confront their fears, helping them to build the skills that actually matter. That's what I do now, and I didn't quite realize it, but so many people told me that's what I did then. I just didn't think of it that way.
Yes.
So when I made the transition, I didn't have to work too hard. I stepped into a classroom for the first time. It was a no-brainer. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I had no nerves. I'd been on stages all of it, but I'm here now trying to connect to a college student who's looking at me wondering, why are you in front of this in the classroom? Why aren't you at BlackRock or at Citadel? And when you're 18, that's the way you think. You got this big, huge Wall Street career ahead of you. They don't really see the twist, the turns, the struggles, the challenges, the questions we face, the life circumstances that cause us to think differently that we never could have predicted. So your situation, my situation, we could not have predicted that. You didn't know.
Yeah,
But
mine was a culmination though, like in terms of, I had a near-death experience I'll never forget, I was in Cebu and I was on a conference for a client where we were doing a big relaunching their brand and we were at a cinema we were at a cinema where we were running the show and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of the cinema and it was packed and I'm looking at the CEO of the company that we were relaunching their brand for. And he was quite, like flamboyant. And next thing, the roof, all this water starts trickling down. The roof completely collapsed on us. So I think for me, mine
oh
was,
my God, you had one of these too, a near
yeah.
death.
And they were, and I was lucky it just missed me by like sheer, like I froze and my, CEO Marquis, well, of the company who was my client, he saved my life. He pulled me out away because it literally was the roof was collapsing, and then and then we were looking for dead people for I don't know 4 hours that evening because it was underwater, and so I think mine was a culmination over quite a few years, but I think that's what probably led to my burnout as well. So I relate to everything you're talking about because you're just kind of like, what was that at the
Whew.
time? Yeah.
That was your 9/11 moment. And
Yeah.
when I fell off of Mount Elbrus, I had two moments. And what I wrote about in my book, The Moment That Defines Your Life, those two moments define my life. The moment of uncertainty, 9/11, what do I do with this? To the moment where I fell off Mount Elbrus, now I know. Look at the space in between. It was about 12 years. It
Mm,
took from 9/11/01 till 2013 and all those mountain climbs in between. I didn't have the answer. So what did I do? I kept climbing and I kept climbing. And then I fell and then I got back up and I kept climbing. And then bam, it hit me. But to you, as the culmination, I think that is most of our listeners are you can't predict that event. But my TED Talk B is what do you do with it?
yes.
And what I'm attempt to do. It's September 26th in Luxembourg, and it's called The Drop Point That Defined My Life. I dropped off a mountain, something
I love that. Love
unexpected
that
and
title.
sudden. Thank you. Something unexpected happened. I dropped. Now, a drop point in physics or in chemistry is when something changes, say, from a gas to a liquid. It's a drop point, it transforms. I transformed because I got off that mountain. I'm doing something 180 degrees different. That drop point defined my life. The crampons, the ice axe, they saved my life. Okay, a lot of mountaineers' lives were saved because of crampons and ice axe when I fell off the mountain, but their lives aren't defined in a particular moment. And it was the juxtaposition of the 9/11 moment, the Mount Elbrus moment, and I put the two together and I thought about what were the circumstances in between. Oh my God, I see it so clearly now. I don't know why it took so
So
long.
long.
I didn't want to push it though. I just let things be and see where it would take me. And bam!
It's
Maybe it's
amazing.
just whatever gods may be were looking after me, and maybe it was meant to take 12 years, not 12 seconds. Who knew?
Who knew? And I think you're right. I think it takes as long as it needs to take,
Right.
it's like when you say, and you probably get this all the time from leaders and things, or even these, like, I mean, I say it at times myself, I'm behind, or I'm running behind, or you know, but what does that actually mean? Because are you really running behind? Like, are you really like, the only demon that you're having this conversation with is your inner demon, that inner conflict.
Yeah.
Like you talk about it in terms of, I talk about inside out transformation. It starts within here. And depending on how deep your soul's asking you to go, I say soul is asking you to go, it may take as long as it needs to take. And I think that's okay because not one person is exactly the same. And we all have our own lived experiences that enable us to get to where we're meant to go or what our life purpose is, or do you know what I mean?
Well, here's the simple and powerful moment. It's now our life. We get to make the rules.
Yeah.
What happens when someone else is making the rules? Be at the office at 8 o'clock, be on time, do this lunch, do this meeting, here's the calendar, and everybody's telling you what to do. And as kids, college, when we're in the beginning of our career, you do what you're told. Okay, that's cool. You understand that. That's the way the rules are played, even though no one tells you that. But what happens be in your transformation, post roof collapse, my transformation, drop point on Mount Elbrus? I said, the hell with it. I'm going to make the rules now. I'm going to get time, mobility, freedom, all those things that we dream about, but nobody's going to hand it to you. And sometimes it occurs in unexpected places and in circumstances you never could have foreseen. But my point in my TED talk is, what are you going to do? You're just going to keep doing the same old thing and then complain that nothing's changed? No one's going to do it for you. You take the step, as terrifying as it may be. And the majority of people that do look back and say, what took me so long? And
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
All right.
Yeah, and I think that was what happened to me when I finally hit severe burnout, and it was
Yeah.
almost like my body stopped, everything stopped, and you probably see this
Yeah.
as well in terms it was like something it was getting slammed in my face at this point, and I'm like, it was like enough's enough, enough's enough. You're not listening. Listen, 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 and then that was it for me. I was like, right, this is it. I have to do it my way now, and I have to do it for me, and I have to do it. I have to share my lived experiences and support and guide and help others, who need that, who haven't had someone to be able to guide or support them to go, you know what? It's not as hard as you think it is to transition or change or transform from one form to another. It is
Yeah.
probably, and it's not, but at the time you're like, this is so effing scary. Like
Right.
you know, you being on the side of a cliff and like waiting 3 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe having a cinema roof collapse on me at the time, it was scary, but I kind of go, it wasn't as scary as when I actually, 3 years ago was like, no, I'm not staying in the same career I've always been in. I'm going to start my own company and do my own thing. That was scarier for me.
Of
It's
course.
it's
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it?
I want to give a shout out to a book that for anyone, if this story resonates. I read a book by a New York Times journalist named David Brooks, and the book is called The Second Mountain. And it talks about in the frame of the two mountains. The first mountain, the mountain of self, the second mountain, the mountain of others. So you lose yourself in the service of others. So mountain one, the career mountain, career expectations, what society expects. Many people make the transition, as you and I did, to mountain two. That book helped me put in perspective. I was long into my second mountain already. So I read this book 5 or 6 years after all this started. But I want to give, that was a wonderful book that if anyone is contemplating the terror that may come from leaving the mountain you're comfortable with to now ascending to the mountain of others and trying to live a life now of love, care, and compassion. That's a very different thing. And that book helps anyone who is looking for antidotes or perspective or insight. I found it very helpful and very healing.
Yeah, sounds amazing. So the sort
Yeah.
of so the sort of business, so you work with obviously leaders and you work with businesses. Do you look at just the individuals or from a business perspective as well? And this might be an early morning question, but if I think about a mountain of self and a mountain of others, in terms of when you're working with a business, and obviously from all your experience with Wall Street, how do you look at it from a total business perspective as well? Do you start with the individuals and then look at the total business? Like, how does it work in that regard for you?
I don't want to say that the business doesn't matter. I work for a lot of very big companies and I work for individuals who have a role in that company. Often it's the C-suite, sometimes it's an emerging leader. I am not concerned about their business. I don't look at the balance sheet or the profitability. That's not why I'm there. I am there to help them with particular leadership competencies they either lack or they care to further develop. Now, many leadership coaches can claim to do all things to all people for all things leadership. I don't. I help people with two competencies, and that's it. I don't claim to be the leadership coach that does everything.
Yeah.
Two, two skills, public speaking and emotional intelligence. What happens be in so many executives, the common element, they are promoted on the strength of their technical competence into
Yeah.
leadership positions whose job descriptions do not match their competencies. And here they are, oh my God, you mean I have to talk to people? I have to get on stages? I have to be in meetings? I have to impress people? Yeah, all of the above. And to the engineer or the scientist that is suddenly put into that role, they are terrified. And what happens? Many fail. They're very good at the thing that got them there. They're not very good at the thing they're expected to do in front of them. And it usually comes down to communication skills. Second, emotional intelligence. And to anyone listening, I am giving you a piece of insight, and I hope that you will heed my advice. I'm speaking from an American centric point of view, but I suspect I've been to Australia and all the other English speaking countries. Our educational models overemphasize the importance of intellect and underemphasize the importance of learning to stay calm under the weight of pressure and expectations. In other words, temperament. So think about the dichotomy between intellect and temperament.
Mm.
One does not correlate necessarily to the other. If you have a brilliant mind and you are put into a position of pressure, we're going to find out what you're made of. And if you haven't learned or conditioned to operate under the weight of that pressure, you're not going to do well. In emotional intelligence training with many executives, I work with them to help identify, assess, and improve their emotional intelligence, which include empathy, self-awareness, social awareness. So to me, B, communication skills and emotional intelligence are opposite sides of the same coin.
Mm.
People are terrified to speak in front of others. I'm not. It's what I
Neither,
did for
neither.
you. But I respect and appreciate their fears, and they are real. And we need to figure out, what are they afraid of? What do they struggle with? Why are they so subject to the judgments of others? Why do their perfectionist tendencies get in their way? Many people who public speak are brilliant or try. They don't forgive themselves for making the slightest mistake because they were such great students in school that expected 100 on a test. Well, the only test in communication is, are you connecting to the person who's listening to you?
Mm.
That has nothing to do with the
Mm.
educational model that is conventional. So, to answer your question, those are the leadership competencies that I can help with. And I'm very blessed and grateful for so many companies that hire me to help their executives in either one and sometimes both of those domains.
Interesting. The emotional intelligence piece, when you obviously again back to, your the self mountain and the mountain for others, do you come across leaders who are in transition, if you like? So, and then how does that, because obviously, I love that you're focused on two skills and what you specialize in as a leadership coach. But given your lived experience, given what happened with you with 9/11 and then what happened with you in Russia, what happens when you come across these leaders, that are in that transition and ultimately you're there to work with them on their emotional intelligence and their public speaking?
Many of them do not say publicly to me or anyone else that they are in the transition until they make up their mind to do it. So
Yeah.
I want to be honest and say in that when companies hire me, they don't give a damn about this person's next life. They
No.
only care about
Yeah.
right. So, but I say that, and your question is a very valid one, because when you start to get into the heart of someone, and I must say my job is a bit of a therapist, even though I'm not
Yeah.
one, but there is a therapy element to it, and you get very close to your patients. They're not my patients or my clients, but it's a very intimate relationship. And they relate a lot of things to you that they otherwise wouldn't say to anyone else. If for no other reason, I need to know that. I need to know what's in their way. And if they're not honest with me, I'll never uncover it and I can't help them. So, what I expect from them is brutal honesty. And what they expect from me is brutal honesty. And if we start from a place of candor, they reveal a whole lot of stuff,
Yeah.
which is good. And I'm grateful for that. But their transitions are, the majority of people do want to make a difference. They do want a life of fulfillment, but they just don't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
And I will say, many people are living up to other people's expectations expectations and they're miserable. They just don't admit it to anybody.
No.
And until they start living their own life and up to their own expectations, they know they're probably not going to make as much money as they did, but they begin to redefine what success looks like. It's no longer, I have a Ferrari, you have a Porsche. That's a very Wall Street thing. They stop talking about that stuff because whatever. Is that really why we're here to talk about your house and your car and your jewelry? All of a sudden, the narratives begin to change. They're talking about the mountain of others, about serving others. That is a completely different conversation than when you have a community of people on Mountain One that get together and talk about their riches. Okay, after a while, that begins to wear out and it looks real old and it's not particularly interesting. The interesting and compelling ones are the ones that recognize there's some other mountain out there and maybe that mountain is for me, but until I begin to explore and self-discover, I will never know.
No, I love that. It's so true. And have you read the book? I mean, you probably have The Psychology of Money. Have you read that book?
Yeah, oh sure. That's a really good one because it describes we have a relationship with money and we should. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, many of the people that I work with, that is the only benchmark by which they deem a success. And yet underneath it all, they're miserable human beings. And it's very sad to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it's a sad existence. If that's what's driving you and you have no other joy in your life, they eventually figure out and they say, oh, there's got to be something more. And they'll find it.
Yeah, but that for me, what you're talking about also is that, this is the new world order. Like this is for me what, that the old world of, riches, and it's always going to be there, right? But with everything going on in the world right now, we've got so much happening, like, war, politics, you name it, and you look around and you kind of go, what's his life all about? It goes back to the question you had, however many back in from 2001, where you
Yeah.
just like, and I've had some recently myself, even where it's like, we've got to make an impact in this world. We have a choice. We can either keep living it and just living in existence, or, we can make a difference. We can make a positive, impactful difference in the world. And I choose that. I choose that than just living and, living in an existence, because that's where I feel what we need to do as a global community to make the world a better place, because it's not going to
Well,
get better on its own.
it is. And as we conclude our conversation, I
Yeah,
think this is the best wrapper I can put on this. In the United States, we have a very famous author. I don't know how much he's made it to Australia, but Mark Twain, who was a
yeah,
prolific writer in the 19th century. And he said a lot of very insightful things, but he said the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And that was in my head on 9/11. I began to question that. And I really tilted toward learning the philosophy of Stoicism. I was never exposed to it in college, but that philosophy really helped me as part of my journey, really helped me understand why I was born. I knew when I was born, and I'm grateful to my parents for giving me a wonderful life. But until those moments, I couldn't tell you why I was born. And here I am going through my adult life, raising children, going to work, succeeding beyond my own expectation. And yet I didn't have an answer to a simple question. And my second book, The Moment That Defines Your Life, combines two things: the modern social science of emotional intelligence and the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. And I say that because in the midst of my transformation, I read a book called Meditations by the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who really took the philosophy of Stoicism that was promulgated first by the Greeks that went over to ancient Rome. And it really helped me to identify and to answer these questions I didn't have an answer to. And I think of Mark Twain's quote, the two most important days of your life. And it took me 13 years to answer the question why I was born, the most important, second most important day of my life. And I encourage the listeners, allow yourself the freedom to go on this journey of self-exploration and self-examination. It may take you 12 years, it may take you 12 days, or maybe you're not meant to answer it. but the joy will come in the journey. Don't be thinking destination. Don't think about mountain summits. How many did I summit? When I climb a mountain, my goal is not to get to the summit. My goal is to get home to my family. That's the only goal that matters. So you can sit around and count your money and you can count your mountains. And if that's what makes you happy, I respect that. But I do know the majority of human beings will eventually walk away from that in search of meaning. And I put that out there for people's considerations. And another book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, an Auschwitz survivor, is just another book to help us get in touch with ourselves.
Yeah, amazing. Chuck, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and
Same, V.
you're incredible. And you've got Luxembourg coming up
I
on the
do.
September the 26th.
Correct.
Will that be streamed? Like will we be able to see it?
I suspect it will. As you and I communicate, there will be seven of us on the stage, sponsored by the Luxembourg School of Business. I will give you the link. I'll let you know. We'll
Yeah,
put it out
love
to
to
our
share
social
it.
communities. But again, the title is The Drop Point That Defined My Life. And it's very much what you and I explained. But I'm grateful to the TED organizers for the opportunity, and I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I love that. And how do we find out more about you? Obviously, your website,
Yeah,
LinkedIn. How do we
of
get your
course.
books?
You bet. Well, you can always go to chuckgarcia.com. So if you can remember my name and you can add a .com, you got a
Yes,
shot at this.
great name to remember.
There's, there's a big contact button. You can always hit the contact button, give me your email address. I am active on LinkedIn. I have many followers and I'm grateful for that. Those are the best ways. My books, A Climb to the Top and The Moment That Defines Your Life, are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all the right places. But you can just go to them, or you can go, if you Google me, it's
There
all
you
out
are.
there. Just Google Chuck Garcia. But B, it's been a real pleasure. And I thank you for the opportunity. It was wonderful working with you. And I hope we do it again.
Yeah, me too, Chuck. I'll maybe after your Luxembourg TED Talk we can chat. But thank you so much. Have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening. I was about to
And
say
thank you.
day, but it's
And a
evening.
great day to you too, as well,
And
filled
a
with
happy week
coffee.
ahead.
And yes,
Thank you so
thank you,
much,
B.
Chuck.
It was a pleasure. Take
Take
care.
care. Bye.
Bye bye.